Have you ever had everything taken from you with the twist of a lock? Imagine waking up to find the only road to your home sealed shut, strangers smiling as they call it justice. That's exactly what happened here. A ruthless HOA tried to trap a man on his own land, thinking he would beg for mercy. But they didn't know he held the title to the bridge they all needed. This clash would turn neighbors into enemies, cops into pawns, and tear a whole community apart. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. You're not just here to watch, you're part of this fight. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Hit that like button and subscribe so you're right here when the truth hits hard. Liam stood at the locked gate like a man staring down a firing squad, fists tight, jaw clenched. On the other side, Clara stood in her perfect white blazer, her smirk cutting through the silence like a blade. Behind her, police cruisers idled, lights flashing like they were already waiting to drag him away. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. Her voice was a dagger, sharp and slow, telling him the gate would stay sealed until he learned to respect their rules. Every word was meant to humiliate him. This wasn't just a fight over property anymore. This was her victory lap. Clara had been waiting for this moment for months, and she wanted him to break right here in front of everyone. Liam didn't flinch. He didn't even speak. He just looked at her with that quiet, dangerous stare that made even the police officers shift uncomfortably. It wasn't silence because he was beaten. It was silence because he had already won somewhere else. His hand moved slowly to his back pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper, creased from months of being carried like a secret weapon. He held it just long enough for Clara's smile to falter. The officers stepped forward, warned him not to cross the gate. Clara's voice snapped like a whip, calling him a trespasser, telling them to arrest him if he tried to pass. Liam didn't move an inch. He just let out a breath like he had been holding it for years, then finally spoke. Ask them if they want to see the truth before they do something they can't take back. Clara's expression shifted, the confidence wobbling for the first time. The officers hesitated, glancing at each other. Liam extended the paper toward them, calm, deliberate, as if every second was part of a game he had already planned. In that moment, Clara's smirk broke. It was just a flicker, but everyone saw it. She tried to recover, barking at the officers that this was nonsense, that the HOA board voted unanimously and had the law behind them. But Liam just stared at her, his calm more terrifying than any shout. A memory slammed through him. The night he signed the papers that made this moment possible. Long hours in a dusty office, fighting through legal walls, cashing out the last of his savings just to claim what his father told him was rightfully theirs. Every insult, every fake fine, every time they tried to run him out, it all led to this folded document in his hand. He took a step closer to the gate. Clara's hands curled into fists. He didn't need to raise his voice when he said it. They all heard him clearly. This isn't trespassing. This is my bridge. The air changed instantly. The officers froze, one of them taking the paper from Liam with a hesitant look. Clara tried to speak, but her voice cracked this time, shouting that it was fake, that the HOA had authority here. Liam didn't look at her anymore. He watched the officer's face as he read, waiting for the moment the words landed. Clara's confidence started to crumble. She demanded they arrest him anyway, but no one moved. Then came the sound that changed everything. A car rolling up behind the police cruisers. A sleek black SUV stopped at the far side of the bridge, door opening with deliberate slowness. Victor stepped out, tall, polished, and smiling like he had just walked into a courtroom he knew he would win. Clara's relief was instant. Victor walked forward, ignoring Liam completely, speaking to the officers like they were his clients, telling them this man was dangerous and should be removed before things escalated. His grin widened when he finally turned to Liam, like this was the showdown he had been waiting for. Liam didn't react. He didn't argue. He folded the paper back up, slid it into his pocket, and for the first time all day, he smiled. "Good," he said. "I was waiting for this fight." Clara's smirk vanished completely. Victor stopped smiling, and in that single breath, everyone knew this was no longer just about a gate. This was war. The officer holds the paper like it might burn him, eyes scanning names, dates, seals. Clara barks for cuffs, her voice sharp and eager, but it wobbles when the second officer leans in and goes still. Liam says the bridge sits on a private easement, title recorded, transfer confirmed, and anyone crossing today did it by his permission alone. Clara laughs too fast and too loud, then calls him a forger. If he's lying, why do the officers look scared? Liam asks if they really want to test this in front of cameras, insurance companies, and a county clerk who hates being woken up. One officer swallows and says they need a supervisor. Clara pounces on the hesitation and orders the gate to stay sealed. Liam nods calmly and says 1 hour from now the bridge closes to everyone, including her. Who flinches first when a whole neighborhood becomes a stranded island? Clara steps close enough to spit out words about rules, fines, and bylaws. Liam answers with 3 lines: recorded deed, right-of-way control, trespass liability. Her confidence thins like paper under flame. A neighbor whispers that his delivery is stuck. Another mutters about a late dialysis ride. Every complaint drifts to Clara like smoke she can't wave away. When power turns into blame, who do people side with? Clara dials someone and puts it on speaker. A breathless board member yells that vendors can't get through. Homeowners are furious, and an emergency courier is circling. She hisses to hold the line and accuses Liam of endangering the community. Liam tilts his head and asks the officers to note who welded the HOA lock. If an ambulance needs the road and a welded gate blocks it, who carries that weight in court? The SUV door shuts with a soft thud and Victor arrives with a smile that looks practiced. He greets the officers like old acquaintances and tells Clara to breathe. He says the deed is irrelevant. The HOA acted under authority, and this man is escalating a nuisance into a crisis. Liam doesn't blink. He points to a line on the document and tells Victor to read where the easement owner may regulate access for safety and maintenance. If the law is a game, why step onto a board you didn't study? Victor waves a folder of filings, promising an injunction by sundown. Liam says sundown is generous. The clock he cares about hits 1 hour. He turns to the officers and asks if they prefer a civil dispute or a public debacle where their body cams capture a private bridge turned into a blockade. The radio crackles. A supervisor is en route. Clara folds her arms and tries to look taller. When the bluff meets a receipt, which one blinks first? Liam looks past Clara to the line of faces watching. He says once he nearly lost the cabin and the bridge in 1 week, and it never left his bones. He worked 2 jobs, sold what he loved, and signed on a table that shook under a flickering bulb. He says if they think he came this far to kneel at a gate, they don't know him. When someone has nothing left to lose but their name, what scares them? Victor steps closer and lowers his voice, calling Liam reckless, predicting fines, fees, and a court winter he won't survive. Liam answers that winter doesn't scare the man who already survived it. He asks Victor if he wants to keep telling homeowners that their groceries, medicine, and payroll vendors wait on an HOA power trip. Victor's smile slips, then returns thinner. Is a polished threat still a threat when the audience stops clapping? A patrol officer pulls Liam aside and asks if the document is real. Liam quotes the book and the case number, calm and quick. The officer nods once and walks back to Clara, advising caution. Clara bristles, saying they can't reward defiance. Liam replies that consequences cut both ways, and today the blade faces the hand that grabbed first. If you swing for control and miss, what does it cost to recover? Phones lift. A homeowner shouts that his mother's nurse is waiting at the far end. Liam sets the 1-hour timer aloud and says at minute 60 the bridge closes until a proper access schedule is negotiated in writing with signatures, notice, and clear lanes for emergency services. He adds that any false claims to officers will be documented and sent with the video of last night's welding job. The crowd murmurs. Truth travels faster than sirens when fear fuels it, doesn't it? Clara tries to shift the ground under him, saying his father's papers were questionable, hinting at old rumors. Liam says rumors die when stamped against a county seal, and that seal is on the page the officer still hasn't let go of. Victor starts dictating timestamps to Clara, building a narrative for their motion. Liam thanks him for the record, then promises to attach their words to every homeowner email. When a story meets receipts, which one survives the night? A car horn bleats from the far side. An elderly man leans out and asks if he's truly trapped behind a neighborhood argument. Liam nods once to the officers and says emergency passage will be honored for medical, life safety, and essential services while negotiations proceed. Clara snaps that only the HOA controls exceptions. Liam answers that only the title holder decides who crosses his bridge. Authority sounds different when it comes from the source, doesn't it? The supervisor's voice arrives over the radio, steady and measured, instructing officers to maintain peace, document everything, and avoid enforcement until confirmation from county council. Clara sputters that this is endorsement of chaos. Liam quietly says it's endorsement of caution. Victor taps his watch and tells Clara to prepare statements, then leans into Liam and promises this will get ugly by morning. Liam replies that it already is, but not for him. He steps to the gate and rests his hand on the welded seam, counting seconds in his head like they're beats in a song he knows by heart. He tells Clara she has 1 hour to remove her lock, sit at a table, and sign what should have been signed months ago, a legal access plan that respects the deed and the people who live on both sides. He adds that the first ambulance that appears goes through without a word from anyone but him, and if it's blocked, the liability attaches to the name on the welding receipt. Whose name is on that receipt? Clara's phone lights again. The board member on speaker is panicking now, saying deliveries are turning around and homeowners are recording everything. Victor whispers for her to hold the line and let the clock pressure him. Liam hears it and smiles without warmth. Time favors the party who planned for it, he says, and today, planning came with a signature. The officer finally lowers the deed and nods to his partner. They don't cross the gate. They don't touch Liam. They choose distance and documentation. Clara watches that small choice and understands the wind just shifted. Power is a costume that fits poorly when the crowd stops clapping. How long before she feels the fabric tear? Liam resets his timer loud enough for everyone to hear. 57 minutes remain. He turns his back to Clara and faces the line of waiting eyes. If this many people can be stranded by one welded lock, imagine what happens when the one who owns the bridge decides it's closed for maintenance. He pauses just long enough to let the math sink in. Who has leverage now? Victor stops smiling. Clara bites her lip. The officers stand like pylons between storm and shore. Liam slides the deed back into his pocket and nods once, almost courteous, like a judge entering a verdict. Then he says it again so no one can pretend they missed it. 1 hour. And as the minute hand moves, a siren wails in the distance and grows louder. Sirens growl closer and every head turns as if judgment has a sound. But before lights crest the bend, the neighborhood's whispers pierce deeper than any horn could, and they all blame the same person in white, don't they? Clara holds her chin high and calls this order, but the crowd mutters about missed shifts, spoiled deliveries, late medicine, and when fear finds a target it rarely lets go, does it? Victor tries to harvest that panic, telling officers that Liam is staging a stunt, but Liam answers with calm precision and a folder thicker than rumor. County letters stamped and signed stating the HOA has no jurisdiction over the bridge, and silence lands like a verdict, doesn't it? A neighbor shouts that his child's inhaler is across town. Another pleads that her father's nurse is waiting, and Clara snaps back that rules exist for a reason. But nobody likes rules when they choke the breath out of a family, do they? Liam keeps his eyes on the officers and recites statute lines like prayer, then hands over the county confirmations, and the officer's eyebrows fold as if seeing his own name on a warning. Which side of caution feels safer in uniform? Victor pivots fast, saying the letters are outdated and a new resolution supersedes them. But Liam taps the latest timestamp and murmurs that time only protects the side that obeyed it, and whose clock is bleeding now. From the shoulder of his memory, his father sits at a kitchen table smoothing a map with hands scarred by work, explaining how bridges look like wood and steel, but they are really promises. And when a promise is recorded, land remembers longer than gossip, doesn't it? The siren hits the line of cars, and a white ambulance noses toward the gate, back doors thudding as a paramedic shouts that a mother is inside gasping between cries. And even skeptics swallow their opinions when breath becomes currency, don't they? Clara starts barking for everyone to stand clear, because only the HOA grants exceptions. But the paramedic's eyes flick to Liam and then to the officers. And in that tiny glance, the whole crowd sees where real authority lives. Can you feel it shift? Liam raises a palm and tells the officers emergency access will pass without delay under the easement holder's authority while negotiations continue. And the officer nods like a man stepping on a solid rock. So who looks isolated now? Victor leans into Clara's ear and whispers strategy. then announces loudly that any movement without HOA consent invites immediate legal action. But legal threats don't restart a heart, do they? The ambulance idles, seconds shedding like leaves, and mothers in line start crying to no one in particular that this has gone too far. And collective anger isn't a spark, it's a flood once the first barrier breaks, isn't it? Liam walks to the padlock welded shut the night before, runs a finger across the scorch, and asks the officer to note the residue. Because when someone seals a gate in darkness, they leave their fingerprints in daylight, don't they? Clara orders the officers to hold him, but the supervisor's voice on the radio is cool as winter. Document and maintain peace until county council clarifies jurisdiction, and Clara's face stiffens like a mask that no longer fits. Can fabric hide a fracture? Victor tries humor, calling Liam theatrical, asking the crowd whether they enjoy this show, but the crowd doesn't laugh when a stretcher bangs inside the ambulance. And jokes wilt where pain grows, don't they? A teenager steps forward with a phone and says he recorded the welding last night from his porch, shaky voice, steady video. And he shows Liam the clip where two silhouettes bolt the lock, and a white blazer flashes in the corner like a ghost of certainty. Who else sees the glint? Liam asks for the file, and the boy airdrops it to the officer instead, and Victor steps in too late as frames capture time, angle, pattern, and that brief flare of fabric that looks exactly like Clara's signature look. What happens when style becomes evidence? Clara explodes, calling it doctored and threatening the boy with liability. But the crowd stiffens, and a veteran in the back says, "Careful, that sounded like intimidation, and intimidation curdles in public faster than milk and sun, doesn't it?" Liam's voice barely rises as he lists consequences of obstructing an emergency vehicle on a privately controlled accessway: civil exposure, criminal jeopardy, reputational ruin, and even Victor stops smiling because math is math in any courtroom, isn't it? The paramedic calls out a number, pressure falling, and the officer lifts his hand toward the gate like a referee ending a fight. But fear of the wrong decision glues him in place. Who moves first when every move is recorded? Liam inhales and glances at the timer on his watch, then says emergency passage now under easement authority, civil questions later under counsel, and the crowd murmurs with that fragile relief that arrives 1 inch before disaster. Can relief be a blade too? Victor counters with a warning that any forced entry will be grounds for an injunction, but injunctions don't ride in the back with mothers who can't breathe, do they? Liam signals the paramedic to hold, then faces Clara and asks where the receipt is for the welding service, date, vendor, card, because metal doesn't seal itself and invoices write stories louder than speeches. Who will read yours? Clara's jaw tightens and she blames a maintenance volunteer, claiming she never approved it. But the boy's video shows her car's reflection in the cruiser's door, a tiny truth hiding in plain sight. What else is in the corners we ignored? Liam turns to the officers and states clearly that he will now open the gate for the ambulance, and that any interference will be logged as obstruction of emergency passage under the recorded easement, and the officer steps back half an inch. Enough to matter. Can half an inch decide a life? Victor starts listing penalties he'll pursue at dawn: liens, sanctions, injunctions, a blizzard of paper, but paper burns when it meets a spark of conscience, doesn't it? The paramedic shouts that they're running out of time, and the mother inside lets out a sound that slices the noise cleanly, not a cry, a plea, and even anger pauses for that sound, doesn't it? Liam places his hand on the lock, eyes on Clara, and asks one steady question that leaves no room to wiggle. Who welded this? And do you want that name read into the officer's report before or after the ambulance moves? Clara blinks and looks to Victor, but his face is stone now because he knows the answer matters less than the clock, and clocks ruin the best speeches when seconds cut them short, don't they? Liam turns to the crowd and lifts his voice, so fear has something firm to stand on, declaring that the bridge will carry life before it carries anyone's pride, and every murmured argument collapses under the weight of that sentence. What else can pride do here? He nods to the paramedic, then looks back at Clara with a calm so sharp it almost gleams, and says 3 words that freeze her where she stands. You caused this. Liam steps forward and rips the welded seam clean with a bolt cutter handed up by a trembling neighbor, the metal shrieking like a confession as the ambulance rolls through under his nod, because when life is on the line, who still argues jurisdiction? The crowd exhales as if one set of lungs just learned how to breathe, and the paramedic flashes a quick hand of thanks before vanishing past the gate. Because mercy travels faster than policy when seconds bleed, doesn't it? Victor surges to reclaim ground, voice polished, promising injunctions, damages, and a paper storm that will eat Liam alive. But Liam's phone is already open to the clip from last night, showing sparks showering off a lock at midnight. And what happens to threats when receipts hit daylight? He tells the officers this footage is going to every homeowner and 3 local desks before dawn, then adds that welding a barrier across a privately titled access way will read like obstruction in any sane room. And who wants their badge tied to that headline? Murmurs swell as neighbors replay the clip on their screens, freeze-framing the telltale flash of a white sleeve aligning with Clara's silhouette, and a silence falls that no speech can mop up, because style becomes a signature when it repeats, doesn't it? Clara lunges for control, calling the video a trap, claiming Liam forged the deed, saying his father never owned the bridge legitimately. And for a heartbeat, the ground tilts as doubt stings the edge of the crowd. How fragile is loyalty when rumor knocks? Liam answers with case numbers and recording dates, tapping the embossed seal burned into memory and paper, then asks Victor if he wants to gamble reputation on a rumor that collapses under one county phone call. And who volunteers to be the test case on a live stage? A neighbor shouts that fines crushed her last month while her husband worked nights. Another says his small business lost 2 deliveries over invented violations, and anger shifts from Liam like a tide leaving a cliff bare. Doesn't truth erode the loudest bluff? Clara doubles down and names a new HOA resolution that allegedly supersedes any private claim. But Liam points to the timestamp that predates it and reminds everyone that a resolution can't rewrite a deed, and who taught power to confuse volume with law. Phones rise higher as the line of watchers becomes a wall of witnesses, and the officers square their shoulders toward neutrality while their eyes drift to the paperwork. Because neutrality under evidence is not the same as neutrality under noise, is it? Victor's grin refits itself as strategy. He pivots to blame the contractor, the volunteer, anyone not named Clara, then promises a forensic audit of Liam's filings that will embarrass him by morning. But threats wear thin when the crowd stops clapping, don't they? Liam tells the neighbors he will schedule open access windows for essential travel until terms are written, signed, and posted, and that emergency passage will never again hinge on who shouts the loudest, because order built on dignity outlasts order built on fear, doesn't it? He adds a thought that lands heavier than rage. If a gate welded in darkness can choke one mother's breath, what else has been choked without a camera? And the murmur that follows sounds like a neighborhood learning its own name. Do you hear it shift? An older man steps from the back and says his service dog was banned from a meeting for being distracting while board members laughed, and eyes turn to Clara's pearls like they finally weigh what they cost. How long can shine hide the bill underneath? Victor senses the swell and leans close to Clara, murmuring a plan behind his hand. And when he straightens his tie, he tells the officers they will file today, that any toll or schedule will be contested, that the board will not be blackmailed by theatrics. But who is performing when the patient is the audience? Liam tilts his head and asks the simplest question of the day. Who ordered the weld? And who holds the receipt? Because invoices are memory written in ink, and ink doesn't stutter under lights, does it? Clara's answer arrives too fast, blaming a volunteer maintenance captain named Ellis. But a teenager squeaks that Ellis posted a fishing selfie at the exact hour of the weld, and the timeline snaps like a twig underfoot. Who else heard it break? Victor masks the stumble with charm and suggests the welders acted out of community safety while the bridge was under dispute. But Liam replies that the only dispute is between a deed and an ego, and only one of those survives a clerk's stamp. Which one breathes tomorrow? Neighbors close ranks around Liam as if gravity found a new center, and a mother with red eyes nods at him with a gratitude that looks like a promise. Because when someone opens a path at the exact second it matters, doesn't the path remember the hand? The supervisor arrives in person, quiet and steady, and instructs both sides to produce documents by end of day for county council review. No further alterations to the gate, no unilateral actions, full report attached, and the order lands like a bridge plate seating clean. Isn't real authority the one that calms the floor? Liam agrees and thanks the officers for choosing caution over theater, then says he will circulate times for essential passage and convene a neutral witness table at his fence for signatures at sunset. And the word signatures carries a weight that rumors cannot lift, doesn't it? Clara tries to laugh, but her voice breaks on the second syllable. So she locks her face into a mask again and tells Victor to proceed. And he flashes a measured smile that says he still likes his odds. What is a smile worth when the room stops buying? Liam studies both of them like a chessboard he's already mapped and tells the watching neighbors this conflict ends with paper, patience, and proof. But not one more welded lock, not one more midnight trick, not one more mother waiting for permission to breathe. And the line of heads nods as if taking an oath. Can you feel the oath lift like a tide? Victor finally steps back as if conceding the hour yet claiming the night. And he whispers to Clara something that returns the slightest curve to her mouth, then retreats to the SUV with a parting look that promises a second act. How dangerous is a smile that knows a door you haven't seen? Liam checks the time and resets his watch for evening, already drafting the notice in his head, already choosing the witnesses who won't fold, already bracing for the paper storm he knows is coming. Because storms don't frighten the man who owns the bridge, do they? He pockets the deed, nods to the officers, and turns to the neighbors with a quiet vow that sounds like law forged from bone. And as the crowd starts to disperse with their screens still warm, a single car at the far edge refuses to move, engine idling as if waiting for a cue. Who sits behind that glass? The window lowers just enough for a pale wrist to flash and a card to slide out and fall face up on the asphalt. A business logo Liam doesn't recognize, a name stamped beneath that he hasn't heard yet, and under the name a single line that reads Private Acquisition Specialist. Why does that title feel like a match pressed to dry grass? Liam bends to pick it up, but the car glides away without a plate he can read, leaving behind only that card and a thin trail of dread that even victory cannot silence. And as he turns it over with his thumb, a question he cannot shake etches itself across his chest like a warning he's already late to hear. Who just entered this war? Morning lands like an accusation when envelopes wait on a doorstep, and Liam finds 3 of them sealed in the same smug font, each one promising penalties, cutoffs, and compliance checks that feel less like governance and more like a hand around a throat. How fast can paper strangle a life? He tears them open and reads the threats to suspend water under a maintenance clause, to audit power usage, to levy emergency assessments for defiance. And every sentence wears the same perfume of control dressed as policy. When did help start sounding like a trap? He laughs once without humor and scribbles notes in the margin, cross-referencing bylaws with the deed like a surgeon mapping scar tissue, because fear flinches at tone but law bows to ink. Which one wins at sunrise? The business card from last night sits beside the letters, its title whispering Private Acquisition Specialist with a name he doesn't recognize, and the combination of pressure and invitation feels like 2 hands pretending to help while measuring his pulse. Who knocks softly while holding a hammer? He drives to see Marcus because some wars require a veteran of hidden maps, and Marcus greets him with a look that says he predicted the letters before they were mailed. How many battles share the same handwriting? Liam explains the welded lock, the ambulance, the crowd, the card with the quiet thread, and Marcus listens without blinking, then opens a folder that smells like courthouse dust and memory. Do answers always arrive looking older than the question? Marcus spreads out documents and taps one sealed page, a supplemental grant recorded years ago to clarify the bridge's legal status after a survey dispute, and the clause glows like a lighthouse in fog. The easement holder may condition access and collect reasonable tolls to fund maintenance and safety. What happens when leverage earns interest? Liam reads it twice and hears his father's voice reminding him that bridges are promises, not shortcuts, and he feels something old and stubborn uncoil in his chest. How long can resolve sleep before duty wakes it? Marcus warns that tolls will rile the neighborhood if done with spite, then slides over a plan that looks less like punishment and more like order with dignity. Crisis lanes, published hours, hardship waivers, receipts that become reports before rumors curdle them. Does fairness travel faster than gossip when it is written? Liam nods and drafts the notice in 5 clean sentences. No gloating, no threats, just structure and a pledge that emergency services come first. And he adds a line that feels like a handshake to every common room. The bridge will never close to a breath or a heartbeat. Isn't that the oath people remember? By noon, a simple sign rises where a weld screamed yesterday, told by policy. Exemptions listed, schedule posted, contact number visible, and neighbors who arrived angry find themselves reading, counting, weighing, because clarity disarms louder than speech, doesn't it? A contractor in a paint-splattered truck rolls up and pays with a shrug, saying he's lost more in pointless fines than he'll ever lose to a fair toll. And behind him, a courier taps a card and smiles like a headache just lifted. When did relief start costing less than rage? The line at the bridge becomes a forum without microphones, stories spilling about notices taped at night, penalties for porch plants, fees for the wrong shade of mailbox, and every story threads itself to Clara's white suit like a needle finding the seam. How many stitches can pride hide? Clara appears flanked by two board members who look suddenly smaller, and she announces that the board rejects any toll as extortion. But a murmur answers that extortion looks different when it wears a clipboard, doesn't it? Victor arrives with a crisp folder and a smile polished to a courtroom shine, promising restraining orders and emergency hearings. But a homeowner raises a phone and plays the clip of the welded gate, and the word emergency changes temperature in an instant. Can heat turn a thread into steam? Liam stays steady and thanks those who paid, tells those who can't that hardship waivers exist and no one will be shamed at a bridge they rely on, then posts a QR to submit receipts for reimbursement if the county rules against him. Does confidence sound different when it invites a ruling? The toll jar feels like a vote counted in small bills and quiet nods, and two men who once avoided Liam's fence step forward to offer witness signatures for evening records. Because courage is contagious when given a job, isn't it? Clara tries another angle and warns everyone that accepting this policy legitimizes his claim. But a teacher in the crowd replies that legitimacy began when the ambulance moved and lives trumped titles, who argues with the memory of breath returning. Victor pivots to the acquisition card and asks if Liam considered selling the bridge for community harmony. But harmony that demands surrender sounds more like a choir that only sings one note. Who wants to live under a song that never changes? Liam says the bridge isn't for sale. The promise attached to it is not transferable. Without a soul, he doesn't intend to lose. And for a heartbeat, even the noisy fall quiet because stubborn dignity carries a frequency everyone can hear. Don't we all tune to it when fear fades? Afternoon builds a rhythm of passage, receipts, laughter that finally reappears in brief gusts, and an old couple hand Liam coins with hands that shake less than they did an hour ago. What is a coin worth when it buys trust? Marcus texts that county council acknowledged receipt of the documents and will schedule a review, and that small nod from a distant desk feels like a bridge plate bolting down. Can a single sentence weigh more than a truck? Victor whispers to Clara that momentum is fickle and nighttime is a lawyer's friend, then gives Liam a courteous nod that hides a promise of trouble. How many battles smile before they bite? Twilight edges the day and the witness table fills with names, addresses, and a line that reads saw weld last night or suffered delay today. And those lines stack like sandbags against a flood no one wants again. Doesn't preparation look like peace with a spine? The last cars pass under the new order, the sign glinting with a purpose that feels earned rather than imposed. And Liam closes the session with a quiet statement sent to every mailbox. We open at dawn, and we open to life first. When did a sentence start feeling like shelter? He walks back to the cabin with the deed in his pocket and the card in his hand, thinking of selling, not selling, of offers that solve the wrong problem. And he sets the card down beside the letters as if creating a small museum of attempts to bend him. How many exhibits does resolve need? Night pulls the sound out of the road until only crickets and breath remain. And somewhere between certainty and sleep, a scraping touches the edge of hearing, the kind that pretends to be wind until it remembers it is not. What noise knows your name? He steps onto the porch and sees the lock on his gate hanging crooked and opened by hands that brought more than tools. And at his feet lies a shape wrapped in twine with a note pinned through skin, like someone stapled a message to a warning who writes letters in blood shadow. He kneels and finds a small animal laid out with cruel neatness, an emblem of punishment meant to teach obedience. And the note scrawl sneers that bridges can break and owners can too. How brave is a threat that hides behind night? He folds the paper without tearing it, carries the small body with careful hands, and sets both on the table where a toll plan was born this afternoon. Because the next plan will be sharper and colder, and it will not stutter. What does mercy become when it is mocked? He dials Marcus first, then the deputy who chose caution at the gate, and his voice is steady as he reports trespass, vandalism, animal cruelty, and implied bodily harm. Does steadiness scare cowards more than shouting? Before hanging up, he walks to the gate and runs a finger over deep scratches carved into the post. Not letters, a pattern, a mark that looks practiced, and for the first time today, he feels a new player's breath on his neck like a draft from a door he forgot he owned. Who else has a key to this war? He locks the gate with a new chain and sets a steel box beside it. Motion sensors linked to lights that turn night into witness. And he lifts his eyes to the road with a vow so quiet it sounds like bone speaking to bone. What promise outlasts fear? The phone buzzes with messages from neighbors saying they heard something strange, offering to keep watch, to bring thermoses, to sit in trucks with their hands on the wheel if he needs them. When did strangers start sounding like a family grown from fire? He thanks them, one by one, and stands alone for a long minute that refuses to end. Then picks up the acquisition card again and reads the name until it tastes familiar, because tomorrow he will call it. And tonight he will make it wait. Can patience be a weapon heavier than steel? A low engine hums far off and fades without showing a face, and Liam steels himself against the dark with a resolve forged on a table where a father once pressed a map flat. And as midnight sharpens around the porch, he understands the next move has already been chosen by whoever left that mark. What line will they cross when the lights turn on? By dawn, the bridge feels like a coiled spring. Liam hasn't slept, and neither have half the neighbors. Trucks parked like sentinels, lights still on. The steel box near the gate pings with its first alert, and he checks the footage. Two hooded figures from the board creeping toward the lock with cutters, unaware the cameras catch every step. How loud does justice sound when it arrives with sirens? He forwards the clip to the deputy before they can even finish their work. Within the hour, county cruisers roll up, lights pulsing like a warning heart. The same officers who hesitated yesterday stand taller today. Warrants are read aloud, the board members' names ringing through the stillness, and the crowd that gathers does not cheer. They just watch, arms crossed, like witnesses at the first honest trial in years. Clara screams that this is harassment, but handcuffs snap shut, and every click sounds like a nail sealing her power shut, doesn't it? Victor arrives fast, papers already in hand, his smile cold as polished glass. He waves legal filings promising injunctions, damages, restraining orders, anything to halt the arrests. But the sheriff arrives in person and simply says the footage was enough. Trespass, property damage, obstruction. The deputies finish their work while Victor's papers flap in the wind. How sharp can law cut when the knife is finally held by the right hand? Clara turns to the neighbors, begging them to see this as overreach. But too many have receipts of their own. Fines that never made sense, letters that threaten liens over trivial complaints, orders that humiliated instead of helped. Their silence is the loudest answer Clara has ever heard. Power dies not with a scream, but with no one answering back, doesn't it? Liam steps forward and says every vehicle crossing this bridge now contributes to the repairs, even HOA trucks. The toll is doubled for the association until restitution is paid for the welding damage. Murmurs ripple like electricity, and suddenly cash appears from hands eager to be counted on the right side of the story. When fairness has teeth, does it stop looking like punishment? Victor's grin twitches, but doesn't fully leave. He reminds everyone that lawsuits can drag for years, that judges can freeze enforcement, but Liam answers that years don't scare men who've already lost them to silence. He posts new hours, restricted crossing except for emergencies until further notice, and signs the notice in front of the crowd. Signatures are louder than shouting when they're written in ink, aren't they? The tide fully turns when an elderly neighbor thanks Liam in a voice cracking with years of fear, saying this is the first time in a decade she has felt safe. One by one, others nod, voices rising, pledges to help watch the gate, to testify, to bring food and fuel if the fight goes long. A neighborhood that once hid behind curtains now stands shoulder to shoulder with him, and Clara feels it. How heavy is a crowd when it faces the person who taught them fear? The mood breaks just as quickly when night falls again. A sound tears through the dark, a roar too fast to be a car creeping. A black pickup barrels toward the gate, headlights off, and smashes through the chain like it was made of paper. Sparks scream as steel twists, and the truck speeds away before anyone catches a plate. Liam runs to the wreckage, fury cold and clear, and finds the camera box ripped clean from its post. Neighbors rush from porches, but the damage is done. The gate hangs loose and useless, another insult hammered home. Liam kneels in the debris and something glints near the tire marks. One small pearl lying in the dirt. He picks it up and his breath catches. It's Clara's, the one she wore at the gate yesterday. Was she in that truck? Did she just escalate from letters and locks to full-on war? He closes his fist around the pearl, rises slowly, and says nothing. The crowd waits for orders, for rage, for a promise of what comes next, but Liam just stares down the road as if he can already see the next battle coming. How far will this fight go before someone doesn't walk away? He turns back to the group and simply says that tomorrow no one crosses until repairs are made and every neighbor is safe. The bridge will stay closed until the county rules, until charges are filed, until the next play comes from the ones who chose to break it. His voice is steady, but the words land like a warning flare. When justice is patient, isn't it even more dangerous? The neighbors disperse slowly, leaving Liam alone with the twisted gate and the pearl still warm in his palm. He presses it into his pocket like a token and walks back to the cabin. The fight is no longer about bylaws or votes or petty rules. It is personal now, blood deep and unshakable. And as the night closes around him, one thought keeps repeating louder than his heartbeat. If Clara is willing to go this far, what will she do next when she realizes he is still standing? And from somewhere beyond the tree line, a single engine starts again and idles, not driving away, just waiting. Dawn finds the bridge barricaded by Liam's own hands. Heavy equipment angled like a verdict, and a simple notice stapled at eye level stating closure until safety and law are restored. Because sometimes peace only listens when steel speaks first, doesn't it? Engines gather on both sides as curiosity swells into headlines, and news vans roll up with lenses hungry for blame. But Liam stands calm at the center and reads a short statement about life first, order second, pride never, and the crowd quiets as if truth just took attendance. Can a sentence feel like a shield when fear circles? Clara arrives in white like defiance stitched to skin, voice bright with outrage, demanding the blockade end and warning of fines that sound tired now. And when no one moves, she realizes silence is not support, but a mirror she can't escape. How long can a mask survive when no one claps? Victor steps forward with a folder fat enough to look lethal, promising emergency motions, emergency hearings, emergency everything. But the sheriff steps out behind him with deputies, and the word emergency changes sides with one nod, because evidence rewrites volume, doesn't it? Liam hands over last night's footage, stills of cutters in gloved hands, timestamps, the path of the black pickup, the torn camera mount, and the sheriff's jaw tightens as he signs a stack of warrants on the hood of a cruiser. When law finally wakes, who keeps sleeping? Deputies move clean and quick, placing board members under arrest while neighbors watch with folded arms and unblinking eyes. And Clara's protests crack into raw fear when handcuffs glint near her wrists, a single pearl earring missing from one ear like a memory she can't swallow. What breaks first when control slips? Voice or certainty? Victor plants himself between deputies and client, legal citations pouring like hail. But the sheriff has read the same books and speaks with the weight of footage, reports, and signatures, and Victor's tide fails to rise because paper without ground is only weather, isn't it? Liam doesn't gloat. He announces that the bridge will reopen in phases once the county confirms the access plan and repairs are finished, fines collected for damage, and emergency lanes protected for good. And a murmur of approval moves like a current through the crowd. Does structure taste like freedom when it refuses to bend? Clara makes one desperate pivot and accuses Liam of exploiting grief, dredging up old rumors about his father and a disputed survey. But Marcus steps from the line with the supplemental grant and taps the seal that ended that debate years ago. And rumor dies when ink breathes, doesn't it? Neighbors begin to speak without being asked. Stories of fines that arrived at midnight, of notices that shamed rather than solved, of meetings where kindness cost more than compliance, and the collective weight settles on Clara's shoulders until her perfect posture loses inches. How many voices does it take to measure truth? Then comes the twist no one expected. A county official steps through the crowd with a letter for Liam. Not a threat, not a warning, but an offer. Purchase of the bridge at a valuation that recognizes maintenance, liability, and the years he carried what others tried to take. And for a heartbeat, every sound falls away. What does justice look like when it arrives with a check and a thank you? Liam reads it slowly and looks at the neighbors. Not their houses, but their faces. The ones who stood here through sirens and night, through tolls and whispers and broken gates. And he answers with a promise that turns into a cheer before the sentence ends. The sale will happen only if access remains free, emergency lanes protected by ordinance, and no board will ever weld a life shut again. Can security be born in daylight when everyone signs it? Victor tries one last sting, sneering at permanence, predicting appeals, but a retired judge steps forward from the back in a faded jacket and nods that precedent and paper favor Liam's terms, and Victor's smile finally admits it is a mask with no face underneath. How painful is defeat when it runs out of echo? Contractors remove the HOA gate hardware piece by piece while cameras roll, every bolt a confession, every spark a small exorcism of nights spent afraid to open a mailbox, and Clara covers her ears as if silence could go backward. But silence only moves forward, doesn't it? Liam turns to her without hatred and says the bridge will carry her too when she needs it, because the promise attached to it is larger than any grudge. And for the first time, her eyes don't flash but sink, learning the taste of a lesson she refused for years. What stays longer in the heart? Humiliation or mercy? The sheriff updates the crowd. Charges filed. Board suspended pending investigation. Interim administrator appointed by the county, and a public review of HOA practices set for next week. And neighbors clap, not like fans, but like builders measuring a beam finally seated. Can applause be a blueprint when it lands on wood instead of air? Marcus grips Liam's shoulder and laughs a tired laugh that remembers old cases and long nights. And Liam thanks him with a nod that carries a father's voice in its weight, because some victories belong to the living and the dead at the same time, don't they? By afternoon, the barricade lowers with ceremony rather than surrender, and Liam opens the bridge not with a flourish, but with a rule etched in his tone. Life first, dignity always, access without fear, and cars pass without tolls while drivers lift hands not in payment, but in salute. Can a road hold memory like a scar that finally healed? Clara leaves in a quiet car with no entourage. White suit no longer bright, but small against a day that no longer bends for it. And Victor lingers half a step too long, then follows her. Because even professionals learn when a door has shut in a language they cannot argue. How loud is a door when it closes on pride? Evening brings a final envelope. The county's formal letter confirming the purchase and the ordinance protecting the bridge's access forever, and Liam signs with a steady hand, the pen moving like a promise carrying weight. What do hands feel like when they finally put something down they were never meant to carry alone? He walks the length once more and stops where the weld once mocked breath, pressing a palm to cool steel as if greeting a friend that stayed. And the crowd behind him is quieter now, the kind of quiet that means safe, the kind of quiet that lets families cook without looking at the door. Isn't that the sound we fight for when we say home? Messages pour in from people who watched this unfold and felt their own battles echoed in it. And Liam answers a few with the same line every time. Hold your ground. Write everything. Let mercy lead. Make the record louder than the rumor. And the replies flood with gratitude and stories he promises to remember. Do shared scars become a map when you let others trace them? Night settles without threat engines or anonymous cards. Only neighbors telling jokes they were too tense to tell yesterday. And somewhere across town, a clerk files away the deed that bought the fight and the ordinance that ended it. And the bridge that once trapped a man now frees a community. How many endings double as beginnings when the right people sign? Liam locks the cabin door and pockets the last remaining pearl he found in the dirt, not as a trophy, but as a warning against forgetting. And he sets it next to his father's map with a small smile that doesn't need witnesses, because the lesson has learned him too. What do we keep when the war is over if not the shape of hope? And as the lights dim and the road hums with ordinary life, the final truth lands where it always belonged. No gate decides who breathes, no board decides who belongs, and no bully outlasts a bridge owned by the people who walk it. So if this moment hit you, say what you felt below and tell the next fighter they're not alone. Because stories like this travel farther when you carry them, don't they?